Now let's move on, to use a market metaphor, to expressive culture in relation to cultural systems of meaning. We'll look in turn at play, art, myth, and ritual. First, let's review some definitions of expressive culture. Anthropologist Barbara Miller defines expressive culture simply as behavior and beliefs related to art, leisure, and play. This gets at part of what we're dealing with here. Another definition of expressive culture is the processes, emotions, and ideas bound within the social production of aesthetic forms and performances in everyday life. This second definition underlines the connection and role of expressive culture in lived experience as part of ordinary life. Expressive culture is also a way to embody and express culture through sensory experiences such as dance, music, literature, visual media, and theater. As we've already seen, groups and individuals express their worldview and identities through oral storytelling. They pass down stories through folktales and moral stories that helped communicate the ideas and values of that culture. They also perform beliefs and norms through visual performing arts, which can offer a multifaceted inside view of a particular culture. Expressive culture expresses as well as communicates, stimulates the senses, affects emotions, and evokes ideas, is produced in culturally patterned ways and styles, and has cultural meaning. Let's explore expressive culture by looking at play, myth, art, and ritual. As noted above, expressive culture consists of those symbolic aspects of any society where we show ourselves to ourselves, that is, express our worldviews. Play provides an orienting context or frame for actions that's consciously adopted by players, is pleasurable, and transforms objects, roles, and actions of the non-play world. This orienting context refers to the rules of the game the players adopt implicitly or explicitly, or it can refer to the culture itself from which the game is drawn. Play is intended to be enjoyable. It also employs objects, roles, and actions from the non-play world. At some level, play is also meaningful. Children's play, for example, may serve as enactments of adulthood. In the Gabonese village where I undertook fieldwork, young boys would cut a wooden disc and then take turns rolling it on its edge and throwing makeshift wooden spears at it. The orienting context comes from spear hunting. Although no longer practiced, elder men still took a spear with them to the fields for protection against wild animals. Surely this activity was pleasurable, breaking the monotony of village life. It also transformed objects, roles, and actions from the non-play world. Functions of play include the following. It imitates the non-play world. It creates an alternate social world, allowing us to exercise our imagination. It also provides an opportunity for innovation. And it comments on and critiques the non-play world. Think of the board game Monopoly, which imitates the world of capitalism with its winners and losers. For the duration of the game, it creates an alternate social world of those who amass capital and invest in houses on Park Place, and those who go to jail, not pass and go, or collecting $200. It allows for innovation and strategizing as we seek to accumulate money and property. It also comments on, without necessarily critiquing, the non-play world in which the winners take all. Sport is a physically exertive form of play that is aggressively competitive within the constraints of culturally specific rules and definitions. Here we see World Wrestling Entertainment champion, actor, and rapper John Cena in aggressively competitive physical exertion. Hey, wait a minute, is this really a sport or is it just bad acting? In any case, even WWE wrestling imitates the non-play social world in a particularly exaggerated way. It enacts gender roles, pleasure, hyperbolic violence, fierce rivalry, grandiose individualism, power, and even morality. Like most professional sports, it allows consumers to enter an alternate social system of meaning that provides a commentary and critique of the non-play world. Sports also function as a powerful metaphor for the nation, gender, and life accomplishments. Sports metaphorically enact nationalism in international sporting tournaments such as the World Cup or the Olympics. But in the United States, we also play the national anthem before most sporting events. Sports also reinforce gender roles by a rigid division of labor. Winning and losing also enact life accomplishments or failures. We venerate the athletic accomplishments and wealth of Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Tom Brady, and now Stephen Curry, as well as Serena and Venus Williams. Art plays with form to produce some aesthetically successful transformation and representation. We can define art as any human action that modifies the utilitarian nature of something for the primary purpose of enhancing its aesthetic qualities. Art also refers to actions, objects, or words valued largely for their aesthetic pleasure of symbolic communication. Here we have three examples of visual arts. Congolese painter Sherry Samba's Dividing Up the Big Fish is a satirical commentary on colonialism and neocolonialism. I don't recognize all of the men in the foreground, but in the background we see King Leopold II of Belgium, who was personally responsible for the brutal colonization of the Congo. We also see a grinning George W. Bush, and in the background, emerging from a cave, Osama bin Laden asks, "Where's my share?" Picasso's Head of a Bull has simply but brilliantly transformed a well-used utilitarian bicycle seat and handlebars into art. On the right, we see beautifully carved Arabic calligraphy of Quranic verses and geometric shapes carved into the wall of the Mosque of Cordoba. Myths are stories with ambiguous truth value but high socially ascribed authority that may explain how things are, how they came to be, or what they will become. Often, when we say that's just a myth, we're suggesting that myths are false stories. But I prefer to treat myths as true stories that express important cultural values about how we view the world. Myths therefore provide crucial insights into systems of meaning. For me, Thanksgiving is the most important patriotic holiday, even though in its current version it doesn't really celebrate what seems to have happened right after the original arrival of the Pilgrims. Most of us see it as a family and commercial holiday today, the kickoff to the holiday shopping extravaganza. Thanksgiving dinner also rehearses gender roles, but I see it as the most patriotic holiday, even more so than the 4th of July. It reenacts a powerful national foundational myth that goes deeper, religiously and historically, than the 1776 signing of the Declaration of Independence. Myths function to justify existing and aspirational social orders, the world as it is, and the world that we desire. The George Washington cherry tree myth about young George chopping down a cherry tree and then admitting to his father that he'd done so justifies our social order by pointing to the honesty and integrity of our founding fathers and current leaders. Even according to the Mount Vernon website, however, this never happened. It was invented by one of Washington's first biographers, Mason Locke Weems, in 1806. This story resonated powerfully with me when I heard it as a child. Whether or not our political leaders are honest, we aspire for them to be. Myth also expresses worldview and provides a conceptual tool for dealing with the contradictions of human existence. Whether you interpret the biblical story of Adam and Eve literally or figuratively, it's possible to consider it as a vital Judeo-Christian origin myth. It tells us about God, the origin of the world, and of life. It also tells about the origin of sin, murder, work, and death. At the same time, it offers a conceptual tool for dealing with some of the fundamental contradictions of human existence: obedience and disobedience, good and evil, paradise and life as lived, the sacred and the profane, peace and violence, life and death. Ritual is pattern group practice, especially intended to engage the supernatural. It is set apart, at least symbolically, from everyday life. It employs socially appropriate ritual practices and expresses ideas encoded in myths. When Muslims pray, they first engage in ritual ablutions to purify themselves before entering into the presence of Allah. Here we see Muslims praying in the streets of Paris during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. By ritually sanctifying the streets, they set this everyday space apart from everyday life. While many French people consider public displays of faith and blocking traffic highly inappropriate, Muslims view the call to prayer as socially appropriate ritual practice wherever it happens. At the same time, given the strong anti-Muslim sentiment in France, this ritual action is also interpreted as resistance and affirmation of identity. Finally, when they pray, Muslims recite the first chapter of the Quran, thereby expressing ideas encoded in myths. Here again, I refer to myths as culturally true stories about the world. Sacred ritual is pattern behaviors that have to do with the supernatural realm. When the priest consecrates the Eucharist and communion wine, he performs a miracle of transubstantiation, converting the bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ, which the faithful then eat and drink, ritually and literally internalizing their faith. Secular or non-religious ritual is pattern group practice intended to express and enact collective meanings. Here, we see a sit-down dinner. Immediately, we interpret this as a family dinner. Now, this family may have prayed before digging in, a sacred ritual, or they may have proposed a toast with champagne, a secular ritual. The sit-down family dinner has become rarer in the contemporary U.S. due to the fragmentation of families, our fast-paced lifestyle, and our 24/7 consumer economy. But as a secular ritual, the family dinner does express and enact collective meanings of kinship, abundance, generational continuity, and gender roles. Anthropologists study various types of rituals, including life cycle rituals, as well as rites of passage, pilgrimages, and rituals of inversion. I'll touch on each of these briefly. Anthropologists study various types of rituals, life cycle rituals, including rites of passage, pilgrimages, and rituals of inversion. I'll touch on each of these briefly. Life cycle rituals mark a change from one social status to another. In northeastern Gabon, Kota and Mahongwe peoples still practice elaborate male circumcision as an important rite of passage that boys go through between the ages of 6 and 12. These rites mark the passage from boyhood to manhood and play an important role in forming masculine identity. Pilgrimage involves travel to a sacred place or places for purposes of religious devotion or ritual. Every year in July, rich, poor, and middle-class Haitians make the pilgrimage to the Seau-d'Eau waterfalls located near Mirabalais, 60 miles north of Port-au-Prince. This pilgrimage enacts both Roman Catholic and Haitian voodoo ritual. For over a century, Haitians have trekked to the picturesque grove where legend has it the Virgin Mary, or Exili Danto, appeared in the middle of the 19th century on a palm tree near the 100-foot waterfall and began healing the sick. To cite just one more example, one of the 5 pillars of Islam is to make the pilgrimage, or the Hajj, at least once in a lifetime if possible, to the holy city of Mecca. In rituals of inversion, normal social roles and order are temporarily reversed. Such rituals often function paradoxically to reinforce the normal or dominant social order. One example of a ritual of inversion is Mardi Gras or Carnival, which takes place on the eve of Lent. During Carnival, everyday practices and order are inverted. Servants become kings, kings serve the servants, men dress as women, and vice versa. Normal rules are suspended and excess becomes the rule. The body is liberated and obscene and risque behavior is expected. Afterwards, in Catholic countries, the strict rules of Lent are put in place. We can define magic as ritual practices intended to have an outcome on practical matters. Trobriand Islanders, for example, practice love magic as well as fishing magic, the latter to protect fishermen who go out into the open ocean in small boats. But are myths, rituals, and magic unique to the exotic people anthropologists study, or do we engage in many other practices that are like myth and ritual, but aren't called this? Take a look at advertising, for example, which enacts the myths, rituals, and magic of consumer capitalism. This beer, diamond bracelet, automobile, fabric softener will change your entire life. A good example of secular ritual is college graduation with all its pomp and circumstance. If you're enrolled on Miami Regionals, I very much look forward to attending your graduation, and if not, drop me a line. I'll be rooting for you. Of course, you could also drop out of college and run away to California to join Sons of Anarchy. They have a lot of rituals too, but they don't give out diplomas. After a long period as a newbie, you go through an initiation ritual to become a member. This will enable you to add patches to your cut or motorcycle jacket and have your club identity tattooed onto your body. But hey, Sons of Anarchy doesn't really exist. It's mythical.